Hey, how's it going, universe? Welcome to another daily movie review, and today we're going to be talking about 1933's King Kong, the original. Oh yeah, the granddaddy of all kind of special effects movies, event films. There had been nothing like King Kong when King Kong came out. The film is directed by Miriam C. Cooper and Ernest B. Shuzak, although it says they're both uncredited, so I'm not sure what that means. I'm not a King Kong expert. It's written by Jane Ashmore Krillman, Ruth Rose, and others. It stars Fay Ray, Robert Armstrong, Bruce Cabot, Frank Riker, Sam Hardy, Noble Johnson, and others. The plot synopsis is a film crew goes to a tropical island for an exotic location shoot and discovers a colossal ape who takes a shine to their female blonde star. He is then captured and brought back to New York City for public exhibition. So I have not seen this movie in a long, long time. So long ago, I would say, I could almost say I probably had never really watched it. I mean, I've seen clips of it over the years constantly because it's, any documentary you watch about filmmaking or the history of filmmaking, King Kong is always mentioned. I mean, it's such a seminal, important movie in the history of of filmmaking in general. I mean, this is a movie that took Hollywood years kind of to catch up to in terms of craftsmanship. And it's all wrapped up in this kind of fun, flighty adventure movie that's like kind of it's thrilling, it's funny, it's it's action packed. It's got everything that you might want out of kind of a populist movie. I would say maybe it's one of the first populist movies. It's got a really interesting production history too. Apparently, a few years before this, there's this fake documentary called Ingagi, and that was about kind of this island where these tribes people lived, and they worshipped this giant ape, and they would give give their women to the giant ape. It was kind of strange, right? But that was actually really kind of popular in Hollywood and the underground circuits and whatnot. It was pulled, I think, from distribution for a while because people just found it really shocking. But because of that, the studio kind of greenlit King Kong, because King Kong, you could even say, is kind of a spiritual successor to Ingagi. And you can actually watch Ingagi on YouTube. They've not really restored, but people have gone back and done the best they could because it came out at a very strange time during film, that transitionary period between silent film and sound film. So it's a weird movie, and like they just couldn't find the sound sources for a really long time. I don't even think they found all of them actually. So, but people have gone back and tried to kind of stitch back together what they could. So it is available. It's out there, and it's interesting. I've seen parts of it. I haven't watched the whole thing myself. It's like about like 80, 90 minutes long, and I watched about half of it. It's super fascinating, and I can imagine at the time it being like really provocative, like really scandalous. And same thing happened with King Kong actually. When King Kong comes out initially, it's a pretty provocative movie. I mean, people were not really outraged, but they were really taken with the special effects and the violence, and even so much so that they went back after their first initial preview screenings and cut stuff out because it was just too much for people. People were walking out of the theater, and finally they get the film down to what it was, to what we all know. It's gone through various iterations over the years because of TV broadcasting and censorship stuff that happened in 1934. So a year after this comes out, kind of the standard for what could be shown in a theater was changed. But in sometime in the 70s, Janus Films, which is mostly works with Criterion these days, they did a full as they could restoration of King Kong, and that's the one that pretty much everybody's seen today. I love this thing, man. The impetus to watch this was my kid. My kid's been really into Godzilla, and by extension, you get into Godzilla. He watches like a lot of Godzilla movie or clips and videos on YouTube, and they do a lot of talking about King Kong, because King Kong and Godzilla are kind of inextricably linked. When you think about Godzilla, you also think about King Kong. There's also a movie, Godzilla versus King Kong, that came out, I think, in 1960. So this was kind of America's King Kong, before Godzilla comes out. I would say Godzilla, the original Godzilla, is a much better movie than King Kong. It's a much more thoughtful movie. There's a lot more going on. But as like a cool, fun adventure movie, King Kong 1933 is a huge success. And there's so much to like about it. It's got such a, even just, you think about the special effects, right? That has such this beautiful tactile nature to it. Like, you understand that, yeah, you're watching puppets and you're watching kind of stop motion animation, but it's so impressive what they were able to accomplish in 1933. They did all sorts of cool tricks. There's like rear projection, and they would take these, what they would do is they would shoot the scene. So, for instance, like Ann Darrow, Fay Wray's character, King Kong carries her around. And there's some scenes where you see her, and he has to like put her down and whatnot. She'd be like on a crane, and they would film it. They would move the crane, and then they would take the footage. They would rear project it on like a tiny set where they had their models, and then they would match the puppets to the rear projected stuff. I mean, it's really, really cool outside of the box stuff. I mean, this is the first time anything like this was ever done. It's pioneering. And the fact that it actually works so well, I don't know what it is. You're just able to go with it, because I think the movie is so solid, just fundamentally, just as a story, that you're really able to suspend your disbelief and kind of just go with it. And the movie's no slouch either. I mean, this thing has got set piece after set piece. I mean, you got just Kong interacting with people. You got these tribes people that they meet when they first go to the island. You got Kong fighting a T-Rex. You got the little weird creatures that are going on the island. Like, the island is a fully realized place, It's got its own kind of fauna. It's got creatures. It's got King Kong and dinosaurs, and there's a Brachiosaurus. There's a Ankylosaurus, I think, or is it a Stegosaurus? I think it's maybe a Stegosaurus. I gotta ask my kid, my 3-year-old. He knows better than I do about dinosaurs at this point. But it was so much fun watching it with him, because he'd be like, "Oh, it's a Stegosaurus. Oh, it's King Kong. It's a T-Rex." Like, freaking the fuck out. It was so like fun to share this with him this morning, honestly. Maybe that's why I enjoyed it so much. I was kind of like living vicariously a little bit like through him. And what I like about the movie it moves at a nice pace, but it doesn't sacrifice anything. Like, the characters felt pretty well developed. Pretty well. I mean, for the time, you got to put it into context. It's not the deepest stuff in the world, but like, I got a sense of who they all were. And I think a lot of that has to do with just being cast really well. A lot of interesting faces, a lot of like just kind of very specific, idiosyncratic looking people. And you kind of believe that they would be these characters. You just kind of buy into the fantasy of it all. And it's so effective. It's super effective. I mean, I was just kind of taken with it the whole time, just enthralled. And I didn't expect to, because sometimes, you go back and watch a lot of old movies. I watch a lot of old movies. And you do kind of, it's more of like almost like an academic feat. Like, it's an intellectual pursuit. It's like, oh, I want to fill in these gaps. I want to like understand kind of the history of filmmaking and the kinds of things people were doing, the kind of structures, the kind of scripts, the kind of characters, the kind of special effects, like all that kind of stuff. I'm always interested in film from that perspective. But it's always so nice when you watch one that just fucking works. Like, it doesn't matter when it was made. Good is good, I guess. I had this is one of the second or third time I've had in the past few months where I've watched something, from this era and from the years before, where I was just like so blown away. I was just so taken aback. And it's you really get invested. It's really kind of thrilling and fun. And it just works, like I said, on its own level. Like, it's not just because of the special effects. It's not because of all that stuff that makes it good. It's just, it has the fundamentals right. And I don't know if they stumbled into that, if that's just by happenstance or whatever. I have no idea. But it works. And the fact that it's loaded with so much stuff, like, it's got so many different, like I said, set pieces, but also movements. Like, the first act takes place in the city. The second act is on Skull Island. The third act is back in the city with Kong, and Kong climbs the Empire State Building, and we all know the famous footage, the famous scene of him like grabbing at the planes and throwing them and carrying Fay Wray up the Empire State Building. And it's so much fun. It's so much fun. It's got, it definitely has a kitschy quality to it. Like, you got to watch it. Certainly have to give something over to the fact that, like, oh, this is from 1933. But you really just go with the aesthetic. The aesthetic just works. I don't know why. I can't really quite put my finger on it. You just kind of accept it. You're okay with it. It never feels like it's cheesy or corny. I don't know. Maybe that's just me. I don't know. Maybe it's just I'm just like a enlightened person like that. I'm joking. Calm down. But like, just being able to just kind of give over to it. And also, like I said, I think a lot of it too, watch it with a kid. Like, watch it with a little kid that's getting into monsters and dinosaurs and stuff like that. Like, he doesn't care. He doesn't care that it's not state of the art. It's not cutting edge. I can't even imagine. Like, I would love to get in a time machine and go back to this time period and go see King Kong and like with a contemporary 1933 audience. Like, I can't even imagine. Minds must have been fucking blown. And I was trying to think, for me, like, what was the thing that I saw that like blew my mind? Like I was consciously aware that like, wow, this is a step. This is a leap. You know, it's crazy. I couldn't think of any movies in particular. Like, I was born in the late 80s, mostly, you know, most of my formative years in the 90s. And I couldn't think of anything that really like stood out in terms of this kind of thing. Maybe like Jurassic Park, I suppose. I think Jurassic Park is definitely part of the lineage of something like King Kong, where it is that like that giant leap forward in what is possible in movies and technology, right? So that would be definitely a comparison. It probably felt like when we went to go see King Kong, although I would say, or Jurassic Park, but I mean, we were primed with a lot more stuff before Jurassic Park came out. In fact, they were kind of using the same methods they used in King Kong about up until Jurassic Park is made. You know, a lot of people don't know Jurassic Park was kind of a gamble. They didn't know if they're going to be able to pull it off because there is a lot of CGI in Jurassic Park, even though, I mean, they did a lot of stuff with practical, like giant puppets and giant, like, you know, animatronics, but there is quite a bit of CGI in it too. And they weren't sure if they were going to be able to pull it off, but they did, you know, as we know, as history tells us. I watch Jurassic Park all the time. It's one of my kids' favorite movies. And it's a great movie. So probably Jurassic Park, but one of the things that stood out to me was like, I thought of a video game. I thought of Tomb Raider. Like, Tomb Raider came out when I was 10 years old. And I remember watching, there's this opening scene where it's like Lara Croft and like these mountain guys, these Himalayan like mountain guides, like going up to this giant door that leads into a cave. And I remember just being so fucking blown away. Like, wow, is this possible? Am I seeing this? I remember asking my dad, I'm like, do you think this is just going to replace actors someday? Like, I was that kind of impressed with it. I don't know. Maybe I was sheltered when I was 10. I don't know. But that was the only equivalent thing I could think of, yeah. But I'll tell you this, though. If you have never seen King Kong, the original 1933 King Kong, definitely give it a watch. I mean, I think most people my age probably are more familiar with like the Peter Jackson, the one from 2005, which I also rewatched, and I'll be doing another video about that. But, so you're going to be pretty familiar with the story. But there's a economy of storytelling here that I think really elevates the experience. Nothing overstays its welcome. Everything feels pitched perfectly, paced perfectly. You know? Which is something we're going to talk about when we get into the Peter Jackson's version. But, yeah, definitely go watch King Kong. I think you're going to be pleasantly surprised. Especially if you have a kid. If you have kids and they're young, they're like my kid, 3, 4, show them King Kong. They're going to have a blast. It is a fun movie. It legitimately has like some thrilling, scary moments, some great hero moments. It's got everything you want out of like a crowd-pleasing populist adventure film, you know? It wasn't until, you know, it reminded me of like when I was a kid, like going to see something like the Brendan Fraser Mummy, the 1999 movie, which I know is probably not everybody's bag, but it has that kind of sense of adventure, that funness. Because the Mummy, you know, that was made to kind of be like a 1940s adventure serial movie. So this definitely, those adventure serials definitely probably owe a little bit to King Kong, in terms of like influence and whatnot. And even up until today, you know, you still see the DNA of King Kong out there. And I honestly, out of all the iterations, there was one in like 1976 with Jeff Bridges and Jessica Lange. There was one, and Peter Jackson did one. And then there was one not a couple of years ago, Kong Skull Island. That's part of like kind of their new Godzilla MonsterVerse. Nobody has done it better than the original. Nobody. I'm telling you right now, it is the best one. So watch it. All right, everybody, that's going to do it for me today. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. If you'd like to know more about Zoobox, there's a bunch of links in the description for Facebook, for Instagram, for my personal Twitter. Also, Danimal's personal Twitter is on there as well. If you'd like to make a request for one of these daily videos, or maybe even something for the big show for Zoobox Goes to the Movies, throw it in the comments and we'll consider it. We'll put it on the list. Good night.